Great. Good morning. And if you haven't guessed already, obviously I'm Paddy with the tie, and our gaming friend here, Marcus, with the trainers on. We kind of give ourselves away from a stereotype perspective, but actually that's a really important decision for Bupa. We recognise as a traditional health insurer, very proud of our heritage and roots, that actually to engage our customers and our members more, we've got to think differently about how we do that. And that's been a particularly relevant question for us as we start to move beyond people seeing us as a health insurer, but recognising that what we really want to do is engage people in their well-being. And clearly the topics and the agenda for today is very much around how do you get people more engaged in their benefits, in their rewards, and from Bupa's perspective, how do you get people more engaged in their well-being? So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to that, and then I'm going to hand to Marcus to talk about why we've worked with play. Because actually I think some of the skill sets that we have traditionally had within our organisation has somewhat restricted our ability to engage people more. I think we are, it's quite common that we somehow think that once consumers enter the workplace that we become very different individuals. If you think about your way to this function, actually most of us will be communicating on Messenger or on WhatsApp, or for some of the more contemporary, maybe on things like Snapchat. But you cross the threshold to the workplace, and all of a sudden we start communicating by email or posters or letters. And we begin to ask ourselves questions about actually why are we not engaging with the workforce in the way that we think is relevant. So, increasingly I think we've got to view our employees not as different individuals that work in an environment, in an organisation, but actually as consumers. And how do we want to engage people in the wider world, and how do we learn from some of those other industries, and particularly in the retail and the consumer space, ways in which we can better engage our employees and the people that work with us. The reason that's really important is that we are all guilty of introducing fantastic programs, but when you actually scrape under the surface, the level of engagement can be quite low. And it's rarely that you'll see organisations achieve 100% engagement. Now, of course, that's very much the holy grail of reward. How do you get as many people as possible enrolling onto their pension schemes, enrolling onto their healthcare plans, and not just about enrolment, but actually how do you get them to see the value of what they're offering in a way that's relevant and timely and personalised? And I think digital technology is fundamental to that, recognising that we've got to move from traditional mediums such as the website and paper towards being literally in people's pockets. And the fact now that increasingly all of us have mobile devices, how do we ensure that we can move communication and content from traditional communication modes into areas that, as I say, are much more personalised? The way that we're starting to look at this is also changing. What we're also starting to discover is the more you get people engaged in their health, and particularly for us in terms of their well-being, you start to learn much more about them as individuals. I think as an organisation, we tend to look at the data that we have to our fingertips and then automatically assume that applies universally across the workforce. And actually, we're starting to find that that's not always the case. So by way of example, most organisations recognise the importance of addressing mental health or musculoskeletal conditions in the workplace. Why? Well, once you look at your private healthcare data, or you look at your absence data, or you look at your long-term disability or income protection data, it rightly highlights that MSK and mental health are two of the most prevalent conditions in the workplace. And I'm not saying that that's not the case, but actually what we've found by engaging people through Boost, which is our wellbeing app, that when it comes to individuals making decisions about their own wellbeing, actually mental health and musculoskeletal conditions aren't always at the top of the list. Interestingly, what we're finding is that as consumers, we're all fascinated by how much we sleep, or more specifically, how little we sleep and the quality of our sleep. We're fascinated by what we eat and what we consume and whether it's the right things. And interestingly, one of the other big areas of focus when consumers actually choose for themselves areas of well-being that are most relevant to them, we all want to drink more water but drink less alcohol. So what engagement inevitably does, it provides a richness of data that enables you as an organization to be much more targeted about the types of programs and initiatives that you can offer your employees and ultimately drive better engagement. Now, gamification is crucial to that, and I'm delighted through the partnership that we've had with Play that we have really started to embed some of those techniques that have been prevalent in other marketplaces into our organization, and I'm delighted with that to hand over to Marcus to talk more about that.
Cheers, Paddy. Hello. Thanks, everyone. My name's Marcus Thornley. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm the founder of a small startup called Play. Play was spun out of the mobile gaming industry, and we use what we think is our expertise in game design, but also harnessing data to try and build experiences that are engaging, but then can use that engagement to lead on to habit formation and ideally behavioral change. We work across a number of businesses. We work with Paddy and Bupa across healthcare, but also professional services and financial services and retail and hospitality. And at the core of what we do is, within business, we try and make the mundane fun. We try and make the dull compelling. We try and make those things at work, those tasks and actions that you feel you have to do, tasks and actions that you actually want to do. And for us, it's intellectually really stimulating. We've seen huge success across lots of different businesses. I'm going to run through what gamification means to us. I think if I can leave you with one thought, and I'll start now, is that it's a lot more than just chucking on some leaderboards or chucking on some badges or having some sort of challenge. That's just kind of the window dressing. It might be what the consumer sees, but if you haven't got the core right, if you haven't got what we back at Play talk about, the game's mindset right, then it's all a complete waste of time. What I wanted to start off with was just quickly giving a kind of a snapshot of where the games industry is. Then I'll go on to talk about what gamification means to us, and then hopefully we'll have some time to run through some examples at the end. So where's games today? So games today are a really, really big deal, and they're getting a bigger deal every year. This year, games will make over $100 billion, which is stunning because most of the growth is coming from casual games and coming from mobile games, and almost all mobile games operate on a freemium model. So pretty much everyone can play the game for free, and it's still generating $100 billion. That's bigger than the cinema business. It's bigger than the recorded music business. What's equally, or perhaps more exciting, is what the gamer looks like now. So many moons ago, when I was young, games was pretty much exclusively the confines of adolescent boys stuck in dark bedrooms. And while they still exist, actually, you're more likely to find those boys' mothers playing games now than ever before. So it skews slightly more female than it does male, and it's probably also older than you expected. So there's more gamers over the age of 44 than there are under the age of 20. And mobile's been an absolute key driver for that. If you look worldwide, it's estimated to be 2 billion gamers on the planet, which is incredible. And for us, we take kind of two really important insights out of that. One is that games are establishing a kind of a new way of self-measurement, self-optimization, and kind of self-progression. And whether you look across geographies or ages or gender, people are learning and experiencing through games. And I think what's really exciting is that core game loop, so whatever the game is, if the game's got a blue hedgehog or an Italian plumber, whatever it may be, there's usually a core game loop. And invariably, that is, I complete an action. Once I've completed that action, I unlock a variable reward. That variable reward will then drive me to invest more in the platform, the game, which will then take me to another action. And it's the speed with which you can go through that feedback loop that can lead to some real magic stuff. And there are literally billions of people on the planet whose brains are becoming accustomed to this sort of immediate feedback. And so I think as we go on, gamification is a horrible word. Some notion of a games mindset, of a games approach will be prevalent through almost all the media we use, and you can see it happening already. So if you were to look at the top habitualized digital experiences, whether that be Facebook or LinkedIn or eBay or TripAdvisor or Tinder, like especially Tinder, they're all gamified. They're all gamified to different degrees, and they're gamified because the table stakes within digital are engagement. For us, anyway. If we don't have engagement, then we just wasted a colossal amount of money and it's all a waste of time. If it's all about engagement, then gamification can be really, really powerful in driving that engagement. I think what's interesting and where we see, you've got to realize until 2 years ago, we were making games. And then 2 years ago, we set up this business and we thought, we think we can understand how to build really engaging experiences. What would happen if we went into big corporates and helped them build engaging experiences? And we had very little understanding or knowledge of what the kind of business world was like. We went in there and we could see lots of examples of gamification going horribly wrong because they just kind of slapped on the badges and whatever else it may be. And a very kind of poor understanding of what we kind of call the games mindset. And this is, you know, the same mindset that you'll see across large digital products. So what I wanted to do was to kind of run through 4 of the most important things to us. I'm hoping it's interesting because they're the 4 things that we don't always see done brilliantly in software or platforms or experiences that people have access to at work. And I think this is massively going to change. There's a big march of all the B2C players who are coming into the enterprise space. You know, Slack is on its way or is landing, and Facebook have just launched their new kind of work program. And I think all these guys are going to be concentrating on these 4 things, and they're things that aren't always perfectly done in work. So the first is putting users first, which sounds like really glib. Like no one is ever going to build you something and say, oh, I haven't put users first. But actually what's really interesting in the enterprise space is because you've got a bit of a schizophrenia, because you've got the payers, who are classically, I don't know, procurement or HRDs or guys like you or C-suite, whatever it may be, and then you've got the users, and we increasingly go into businesses and we see products that have been optimized around selling them in to the business, and they haven't necessarily been optimized around usage and engagement, which is really a shame because businesses then end up wasting a lot of money. So putting users first actually means designing systems that people love using. And when we're trying to map business needs and user needs, actually it's that user needs that are the most important thing, because otherwise it's all a phenomenal waste of money. The second piece is beautiful interface design. It's something that it's become more and more important, I think, because 10 years ago we'd come to work and we'd have the best tech at work, and then we'd go home and we'd have rubbish tech at home. And that's completely flipped on its head, and it goes back to the point Paddy was making, that it's kind of no longer acceptable that you might have some clunky thing you use at work, and then on your lunch break you're going onto Snapchat or checking out LinkedIn or whatever it may be. So interface design is something that we see poorly done, and that's something that you can have all the badges and all the gamification mechanics you want. It's not really worth it if you haven't got a compelling interface. The other piece is onboarding. So games do onboarding amazingly. So how do you take a user who has no knowledge of the system, and how do you use the system to teach them how the system works without telling them, but showing them through doing? So if any of you play mobile games, you'll go through a tutorial, which is actually the game teaching you how to play. And it's really, really important because the drop-off on digital experiences is brutal. Consumers are brutal. 80 apps on the whole lose 80% of their users on day one. And the business model can't cope if you're seeing that sort of churn and leakage. And so you need onboarding to actually make sure that people are coming back for day 2 and day 3 and day 4. And the final piece is engagement. And that means really understanding the engagement loops that you've got within the experience you're building, but also being bound by engagement metrics as the designer of the system. So the most important thing we will look at on a daily basis will be how many daily active users have we got? What's our daily active users over monthly active users? What's our day 30 retention rate? Everything is built around engagement. The whole system is optimized around engagement because it has to be, because if you're trying to drive behavioral change, then the way our mind works is we have to build habits. And the only way you're going to build habits is by having frequency of engagement. So again, everything just boils down to engagement. So they're the things that when we're designing are kind of front and foremost. I think once we've got those in place, then we can kind of think about the bells and the whistles, which is what the consumer sees in terms of what you'd expect from some sort of gamified or game experience. I won't spend much time on these because I think you kind of know all these to death. But XP, some sort of economy within the environment that allows you to reward users for the actions that you want them to do. Levels are really important. It's really important to be able to visualize progression. In life, it's quite hard to see progression or to measure progression. Games make it really easy. You can see I'm level 42 today. This is what I need to get to level 43. Badges are interesting. So badges are an example of a digital virtual reward. They don't always work for all people, but for some people they're really, really compelling. And they're compelling because I think they give you some sort of personal validation, but if you're running something in a social graph, then they can give you kind of social validation as well. Everyone can see what you're unlocking. The work we do with Bupa, we'll probably find it looks to be about half the people, 50% of the people on the platform are a bit meh about badges. The other half go absolutely crazy for it. I ran a service out in San Francisco years ago where we had a subscription service that people were paying $10 a month for just so they could get access to unlock badges to have on their profile. It's incredible. Leaderboards obviously important in terms of being able to see how you compare within a social graph. Challenges for us, usually actions that are bundled together, and they can sometimes be editorialized. And then streaks are really important for us. So if habit formation comes from the high frequency repetition of actions, then you need a way that you're getting people to repeat time and time and time again. And streaks, multipliers, basically win bonuses, are a way of doing that. So if I do action 1 today, I'll get 1 point. If I can continue and do it again tomorrow, I might get 2.5 points. And the day after that, I might get 4 points. So people start kind of getting bought into the system because they're engaged in how their XP might be going up. So some examples that I'm sure you guys know about. I thought quickly now I'd just go on to just what this might look like in some products. It's absolutely not a product pitch at all, but it's just to give you an example of how things look and how things work for us. And I can talk about some of the usage metrics we see as well. So one of the big things we do is run Bupa Boost. So work with Paddy and his team, developing, launching, optimized a gamified wellness platform. It's got all the kind of attributes you would expect. So at its core, we're trying to get people to regularly commit to healthy actions. We take a very broad idea of what those actions might be. So it's not just fitness, the stuff that you can measure through a tracker or a Fitbit. It's also mindfulness, it's also relaxation, it's also nutrition. In this example, it's a really complex algorithm that's actually working out, that's comparing like with like, because we've got lots of different actions going on, and we need to be able to, it has to pass Paddy's pub quiz. So the pub test for Paddy is, could I explain it to my friend in the pub, and would they say it was fair? I got 10 points because I had a good night's sleep, and you got 120 points because you weren't on a 4.8K run. And so it's really important that that ecosystem is perceived to be fair, because otherwise it has no credibility. But in this ecosystem, everything you do will unlock points, and the game is to amass as many points to go up the levels as much as possible. So on this slide on the right, you can see this user is almost at level 71. Like that visual stimulus, it seems really, really small, but that donut ring actually showing someone how near they are to completing the next one is really, really important, because there's quite a complex kind of scale in terms of how you level up. And so you might go levels 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 might then be quite a hard level, because if you give things away too freely, they don't mean anything. So then people might be sweating to get past level 4. 5 might be an okay level, and then it goes up again. So it's kind of peaks and troughs as you go up, but it's important that you can show people where they are in that. You can see how you've been accumulating over time. Goals are really important. And what we found is that self-authored goals clearly are the most important. So a user will then set their goals, and their goals can be anything. And it's really interesting. It's going back to the data piece. It's all anonymized, but you can see what goals people are setting on an anonymous basis, and you can actually see what's really, really important to them. And you set the frequency that you're going to promise yourself to complete the goals, and as you complete them, you can see the pips complete. So all the time you're kind of getting visual stimulus. We're trying to create as many win moments as possible. So losing isn't very motivational, but we really try and celebrate and get those win moments and those win feedbacks as tightly as possible. We put this into a social graph as well, because it's a really strong driver. If you can see how your friends are competing, and there's lots of kind of viral loops that will emit triggers through push notifications. So someone overtakes you on the leaderboard, and you'll get something that will push you through. So that's how we do with Boost. The other point, say, in the final piece is just about the usage we see of this. So in terms of engagement, if we're measuring ourselves by engagement, we have it's complicated. Our daily active users over our monthly active users is anywhere between 40 and 50%, which is, I used to work on FIFA, that's twice what FIFA used to see. Our day 30 churn rate, so how many people are using it on the 30th day after install, is between 40 and 50%. We've got people in the office who used to work on Candy Crush, and that's significantly higher than Candy Crush. So if you get this stuff right, you can drive really, really compelling experiences where people are doing it for themselves as opposed to being told to do things. I think I'm out of time, so I've got to stop.
Regretfully so. Thank you very much. That was fascinating.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Patrick and Marcus.